Full disclosure, when it was announced that Disney and Lucasfilm would be making a young Han Solo film, I was definitely in the I don't want that and I certainly don't need that film camp. It just seemed kind of like the safe, boring option for a Star Wars standalone film, and potentially a damaging one, as they would almost inevitably be forced to further flesh out one of the more successfully enigmatic characters in the Star Wars universe. And let's be real, the prospect of casting a young Harrison Ford, someone who could remind us of that actor without simply doing an impression of him, well, that just seemed like a nearly impossible task. And then on top of all of that, there was the behind-the-scenes drama with Lord and Miller being replaced by director Ron Howard at the insanely late 11th hour. All this to say, I cannot tell you how happily surprised I was when I found myself actually enjoying a fair amount of the trailers and marketing for this film. First off, the film just looked great. It was so clear that Bradford Young, the brilliant cinematographer behind Arrival, Selma, and Ain't Them Body Saints, was doing an outstanding job giving the criminal underworld of Star Wars this cool, dim, grungy feel. And it was also apparent that production designer Neil Lamott, who also worked on Rogue One, was taking some very rewarding design risks, like the look of the Millennium Falcon. I thought it was just so gutsy to take arguably the most beloved ship in the Star Wars universe, one that we're so used to seeing banged up and covered in rust and oil stains, and make it shiny, polished, and basically just Landoified. And as for finding a young Harrison Ford, I was actually really liking what Alden Ehrenreich was doing in those trailers. Most importantly, he was making it his own, but also infusing that character with just enough of those winks, those smirks, and those stances that we've come to associate with our favorite smuggler. And in watching the actual film, I found Ehrenreich's make it his own approach to be actually very much justified by what I found to be a pretty solid script. And speaking of the script, it was just so nice to see Lawrence and Johnathan Kasden, for the most part, successfully telling a straightforward, focused, self-contained story. One that they smartly didn't design to present the Han Solo that we met in that cantina on Tatooine in Episode 4. Akin to J.J. Abrams' 2009 Star Trek, where we saw Chris Pine's Kirk take a number of significant steps towards William Shatner's Kirk, so in Solo, we saw Alden Ehrenreich's Han take a number of significant steps towards Harrison Ford's Han. And I've got to tell you, like the risky but rewarding production design choices, I really did appreciate that the writers were bold enough to take Solo, a character who most fans liked because he was this scoundrel that shot first, and turn him into an idealistic youth much more like Luke Skywalker. And it was that character that Alden really nailed, playing him with such believable earnestness and sincerity. Though given a much different task just because his character wasn't written that differently to the one that we met on Cloud City in The Empire Strikes Back, Donald Glover also did a fantastic job in this film. He just so effortlessly slipped into those very bombastic outfits, really owning the character as much as Billy D. Williams. For me, though, the real star of this Star Wars story was Chewbacca, especially in the way that he related to Han. Though there was nothing particularly surprising about the way that those two met in this film, it was still a lot of fun having so much of the story dedicated to that relationship, which was proportionally far more than we'd ever gotten in any other Star Wars film. With all that said, it was a real shame that even with that very talented cast and crew, there wasn't someone at the helm who had an overall vision, and more importantly, the time to execute that vision and to make the most of that very talented cast and crew. Now, to be clear, I can't really blame Ron Howard that much, and I do wonder what this film would have looked like had he been a part of it from the beginning. Nonetheless, that lack of time really did manifest itself in a number of ways throughout the film. To a lesser degree, it was seen in some rather uninspired camera work. Now, to be clear, once again, Bradford Young did a brilliant job lighting so many of this film's beautiful sets. But the shots that covered those sets and the way that those shots were edited together just constantly felt like the rushed, safe options. And there were far more visually messy and confusing action sequences than ones that really did sail. Now, I should say I did enjoy, for the most part, the opening chase on Corellia as well as parts of the train heist, but by and large did find myself getting lost in or simply bored by a bunch of chaotically cut together close-ups in those sequences. But what really damaged this film for me far more than a lack of visual geography was a lack of emotional geography. In scene after scene, I was constantly made to be either confused by, unclear about, or not made to care for where the characters were at or how they felt about anything. And this primarily happened because I was rarely able to settle into a scene with them. beat after beat, either hurried through or just played in ineffective ways. To further clarify what I'm trying to describe here, it actually might be helpful to look at a scene that did work for me, one where the emotional geography was clear and I was able to settle into it, and that was the first Sabacc scene between Lando and Han. Now, to be clear, it wasn't because the scene was slower than the ones around it. Quite to the contrary, it possessed a great pop and brisk back and forth. Rather, that scene was, in a very visual, confident, and patient way, cashing in on the plot lines, the stakes, and the characters' personalities that had been established thus far. Every shot, every acting decision, every editorial choice, all of it showed me where the characters were at, where they wanted to go, who they were in relation to one another, and why I should care. I was sitting at that table with those characters, and it was magical. Even if the stakes used in that scene because of Han's very braggadocious personality were very quickly undone in the scenes that followed. And related to that, I should say that this film's script, though certainly doing a few interesting things, was also far from perfect. And this is also coming from someone who usually doesn't mind a few plot holes or contrivances so long as both those things move the plot forwards in interesting ways. But there were just one or two too many moments for me that not only felt like lazy writing, but partially undid the drama of the journey that the characters had been on up to that point. Another difficult to describe lacking element on this film was chemistry. Now, again, I did feel it between Lando and Han and Chewie and Han, but I never once felt it between Qi'ra and Han, Beckett and Han, or Lando and L3. Relationships that were so integral to this film, and most importantly to Han's maturation. There were also a fair number of moments the screenwriters simply verbally exposited an idea versus take the time to actually show it. Like a character telling Han that he was one hell of a pilot after Han had done all of 5 seconds of very unimpressive flying. In the end, Solo seemed to be a film full of great ideas, many of which were visualized in very stunning ways. I could absolutely watch the Millennium Falcon fly through a beacon-lit nebula or Han race around the streets of Corellia for hours. But even brilliant moments like those just seemed to happen, never seeming to know how to or have the time to make me care or believe in the overall narrative in which they found themselves. If there's not a single cheer when Han Solo and Chewbacca climb into the pilot and co-pilot seats of the Millennium Falcon for the very first time, then something just seems to be missing. And for all these reasons, I will give the film a 3 out of 5. I would still love to know what you guys thought of the film, though, so definitely comment below and let me know. And I am also curious, what do you guys think about this Boba Fett film? I personally am very excited about James Mangold being behind it, but again, similar to the Han Solo film, kind of exploring the character of Boba Fett further seems both safe and kind of boring, and also potentially damaging. Those are just my thoughts, though. Please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.